You are not Orson Welles. Don't act like him, all right? So shove it up your ass. Let's just start, will you?
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Yippee-Ki-Yay, mother.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Welcome to Yippee-Ki-Yay Mother Podcast Classic. I'm Ralph Quattrucci.
I'm Sean Paul Murphy.
I'm Deborah Murphy.
I'm John Quattrucci.
I'm Chris Coker.
And I'm looking forward to finding out what new ground we will break today on Citizen Kane and, of course, on Paul Masson champagne.
Well, no wine before it's time.
We will sell now.
Oh, that's right. He was a big wine seller. I forgot. Yes, this is another film school edition of Yippee-Ki-Yay Mother Podcast.
Well,
and
you
I
chose
brought
it, Ralph, so you don't get to.
I chose it. It's
Yeah.
called Citizen Kane. I don't know if anybody has heard of this film or anybody's ever talked about this film, but we're going to do that. But before we do that, let's do a little round of, oh, by the way, that's what the deep focus shot here is. Let's make that clear. You guys are all in black and white as well, just to show a little honor for this.
Our
film.
audience is very sophisticated. I think they would have figured that out.
Well, they're going to.
Now,
What's
do
going
you
on?
have
There's
Greg
no color.
Tolan down there with you?
He lit this for us, and he's actually back there against the wall. Greg, good job. All right, so let's do a round of what you watched. Drew, what did you watch this week?
Well, I watched two people that I really like die. One is Nichelle Nichols. I grew up watching Star Trek, and she was a big part of that world, so that made me sad. And then Bernard Cribbins died at 93, and he's acting in England for 900 years. Mostly, I fell in love with him on Doctor Who. He played the grandfather of one of the Doctor's companions in one of the most simultaneously tragic and heartwarming storylines. He's just really, I think that may be the biggest audience he found internationally. So that was a loss. So I want to talk about, I know you guys, every time that we do the show, you're like, Drew, talk about your job. Tell us what you do. I don't have to, because you can watch a documentary series on Apple TV Plus. It's called The Big Con. And it's very, very good. It's 4 episodes, and it's about a guy in Kentucky who you could hire to get your disability benefits from Social Security. And he stole more than $500 million from Social Security with very simple fraud. So if you like the true crime stuff and you want to think about me the whole time, I think you should watch The Big Con. But what I really want to I'm sorry, what?
I think you got to explain, are you a con man or do you stop them?
I'm a disability examiner. I don't stop them, although I can report fraud. So if you apply for disability benefits through Social Security, I'm one of the people that decides if you get it, which is why people on the phone are generally very nice to me. What I really want to talk about is a movie that Ralph mentioned last week. And I have to say, I was very frustrated through the first half of it. I thought it paid off a lot of stuff, and I cannot stop thinking about it. Of course, I'm talking about Nope, the new Jordan Peele movie. That is something really special. I'm really glad that I saw it in the theater. I want to talk about it more than Citizen Kane, frankly. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But you can't talk about it until people have seen it. I could say things that you would think, oh, you spoiled the movie, and that's not even spoiling the movie, but the less you know, the better. All I knew was something about UFOs and Jordan Peele, and that doesn't spoil anything either. So I think I like movies that I end up liking more after I think about them. And this one, I cannot stop thinking about it. It's just very smart, and it's got a lot of really neat things to say wrapped in what looks like a big summer blockbuster. And Jordan Peele, man, he is going to be somebody to watch. 3 movies that I think are all great, and each one more sophisticated than the last. Unfortunately, I didn't see it in IMAX. I'm told that's the way to see it.
Really?
The cinematographer is Hoyte van Hoytema, who shoots Chris Nolan's IMAX movies like Interstellar and Dunkirk. He's basically the guy if you want to shoot an IMAX feature film. And apparently it's a great movie the way I saw it, but apparently it really is built from the ground up for IMAX. So if you want to see it, apparently that is the way to go. And I think it's doing well, so it's not going to be disappearing anytime soon.
And it's one of those that you want to see again.
Oh,
for
yeah.
all the things, just to pick up every little,
Did you see it in IMAX, Ralph?
No, I didn't. I don't go to IMAX anymore. After
Why?
The Man of Steel blasted my eardrums to the point where I couldn't hear anything.
They are pretty loud.
I just get frustrated by how loud they are.
Wow.
And
I will say there was one
yeah.
scene where the soundtrack had these hums in it, and they got so low and so loud, the speakers in the theater started to die, and I got really concerned that it was a problem. So that's clearly built for whatever super DTS Dolby mix they have in the IMAX theaters. But
and
just
as film
great.
people, it's a movie that's all about film people mostly. There's a lot of great scenes with, especially the guy playing the cinematographer, and there's some really good stuff going on in there. So I'm glad you liked it.
And like this movie we're going to talk about today, there's so many different things that all work at the same time, like sound design, editing, casting, all sorts of stuff. And it's really worth your time. Even if you don't think you're interested in Jordan Peele's movies, or you haven't even seen Get Out or Us, which you should see, this is something really special.
Yeah. Okay. Chris.
Yeah, I actually didn't see too much lately, but I did get around to finishing season 3 of The Boys.
Nice.
And it's funny, as a really hardcore comic book guy, and a guy who liked a lot of offbeat and independent comic books and stuff. It finally hit me I don't know if they ever even, I've never read The Boys, the comic book, but there is a comic book from the 80s called Martial Law. And it's really, it's one of the reasons why The Boys has never quite knocked me out. I like it. I think it's very good, but it's like, I've read a lot of comics that kind of go over that. Hey, what if people really did have godlike powers in the world? And even the characters in there are created by science. They're not mutants. They're not born with it, that kind of thing. And basically the character of this guy, Martial Law, is like this. He's a superhero, an ex-soldier who is modified, and he's going after this guy who is remarkably similar to Homelander, who's really not a very good person, just across the board. Anyway, long story short, I did enjoy the end of The Boys, or at least the end of the 3rd season. I don't know if Sean and Debbie have finished it yet, so I don't want to get into too many individual elements of it, but it was definitely solid, and I liked it. But I'm also extremely, and I'll talk about this next time, but I'm really looking forward to Paper Girls. I don't know if anyone has seen the preview for that.
I just watched the first episode.
Also based on a comic book that's completed. I read the whole thing, and really looking forward to it. On the surface, it looks like kind of almost like a Stranger Things kind of ripoff, and there's obviously some similarities. But I'm really hoping that if it follows more along the lines of the comic book, it's going to go in some really different directions, and it's a little bit more sci-fi than horror. But
what's it playing on?
It's Amazon. It's an Amazon original.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say something about The Boys. I finished the season as well. I thought it was really excellent. But that show, there's an episode that's basically it's set at a superhero orgy. So you might think, well, there's lots to see there, and there is. But there's a scene in that episode that is essentially a fight scene that is the most exhilarating thing I've seen on television for a while. It's it's so well done, and watching Anthony Starr's face as Homelander at certain parts of that fight, it's just really so satisfying. I keep going back and watching it. So if you haven't watched it, Sean and Debbie, you should definitely give it a shot. Keep watching it.
Oh yeah. And the scene you're talking about is really it's phenomenal.
John.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What?
John.
Oh, so rather than talk about something I watched, something just came across the internet that I wanted to share. As everybody knows, I'm a big superhero movie guy. I'm a comic book movie guy, and I don't like the direction that a lot of these movies are going. They're very woke. They race swap and gender swap characters along comic book characters. Well, they did that with a new film by DC called Batgirl. And it's a $70 million film that they race swapped the lead character, Barbara Gordon, and Michael Keaton is in it as his version of Batman. It was just announced that is it Paramount? Warner Brothers is canceling the movie. They're not going to release it. They're not going to show it on HBO Max. They're not going to release it to the movie theater because it had a preview, and I guess it was not good. Now I've seen some pictures from it. It didn't look good, just the photos I saw. The thing I heard was good was Michael Keaton and Brendan Fraser, who plays the lead villain Firefly. But the movie's been canceled. So maybe DC is starting to recognize, with their properties, they should be doing a lot better than they are. Their TV stuff is good. Their movies are not good. I don't really understand it with their properties. But I just thought that was really interesting that they spent that much money on a film and they're not going to release it. Now, maybe
canceled is the wrong term, because canceled means they didn't make it.
that's true. No, you're right.
Completely different. And they're saying it's a $70 million film. Other people are saying, early figures, is that they spent $100 million making the film.
Oh, really?
From the directors of the Bad Boys Forever.
Right.
And can you imagine, just answering to the stockholders, that you spent $100 million on a film and you're not going to release it?
Yeah.
You're not going to let anyone see it.
What's the reason? What's the reason?
But you know what they'll say?
So
They'll say we're going to save 150 million by not marketing it.
Yeah. And they
That's
also
true.
said they're afraid it will damage the brand.
Right.
It's so bad, it's going to damage their brand.
Because it was supposed to lead to an HBO Max series. That was their intent with the film. And obviously that's not going to happen either. Hey, maybe they recognize, because there's somebody new over there at Warner Brothers that's making this decision. Yeah. So
My boss.
This is
maybe,
I know him.
maybe it'll get them to head in the right direction. I don't know. It's not just them, it's Marvel too. So maybe they're waking up to this a little bit, because frankly, if you look at the box office of some of the latest movies, they're not nearly what they were. Avengers Endgame was obviously the pinnacle. Everything else is, even Thor Love and Thunder, which did all right, is not doing anywhere.
Could it be that there's just too many of them? I mean,
no,
when are we going to be done with this?
I think that's probably a factor.
Maybe, but you know what? For 20 years, they had those Avengers movies, and 90% of them were really good, and people went to see them. If you make bad movies that the comic book fans don't want to see, you're losing your audience. So I think that's part of it, and maybe this will wake them up. I don't know. So anyway, that's all I want to talk about. I just thought that was unbelievable that they would not release it on either format.
I definitely.
Well, now, of course, I think maybe that's why. Now it's going to generate. People are going to want to see it now to see what it was all about, and it will probably end up on HBO Max, maybe, unless they destroy the negative, which they wanted to do to the movie we're going to watch tonight.
There isn't even a negative, so what are you going to do?
That's true, right?
It's too bad, because I'm also like Ralph. I've had my fill of superhero movies. I'm more willing to give something a chance, but I was actually looking forward to that movie with some curiosity, because I love Brendan Fraser.
Yeah.
Apparently he has a big role in it.
Yeah.
So I was curious to see what ends up with him, but I'm sure it'll come out or leak, or it'll fake leak, or they'll put out the, El Arby Fala cut or some nonsense.
Right.
They'll put it out after they have a hit.
Right. Chris, what do you want to say?
I was just going to say this, though, and I agree with you. I understand why they would, maybe shelve something like that. And of course, like you said, it's one of those things. In some ways, it might be a way to generate a bunch of marketing with very little money, because all of a sudden when you're told you can't see something, people desire it.
That's right.
Point, Chris.
But I'm going to ask this, and this is something you brought up a number of times, John, and it's like, but do you think that the reason the movie is bad is because they made Batgirl? I mean, I don't know anything about the film, but it's not.
No.
No,
I don't think
that's. I mean, you've mentioned before that you worry, that you talk about, race swapping and gender swapping and things like that. And I mean, comic books have, especially DC comic books, they restart themselves like every 5 years. I mean,
okay, but if you know the character of Batgirl, she's never changed.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's
Never.
always been Barbara Gordon. I get it. But I guess my question is this, do you think the reason why it was bad was because they chose, I'm assuming, an African-American girl?
No, I think she's Hispanic. I'm not sure.
Okay. But either way.
No, I don't think that's why.
I know nothing about it.
It's sort of like the female Ghostbusters. Was that film bad because they were female? No, it was bad because it was
it's not a good movie.
Yeah.
It's a terrible movie.
No, I don't think
a lot of hits from people who said they shouldn't be women playing those parts. That movie.
No, that's before the film came out. Then the film came out.
Right, even before the film came out. Well, even before the film came out, it was getting attacked.
No, that was
they're
true.
using women in their beloved Ghostbusters.
But that's not what killed the movie.
That's not what killed the movie. It was
ultimately
bad.
what killed the movie. It was terrible.
Right.
Yeah. So
they picked the wrong director. But my point is all the stuff.
Point for me.
No, I'm not making your point for you.
It died because it was bad, not because of women.
That wasn't my point. My point was all the bullshit that said before the movie even comes out because of race, gender, and switching or whatever everybody's worried about. Their beloved product. That's my point. Yes, it sucked because they picked the wrong guy to direct it, and those girls were improvising.
Well, and the script was bad.
Everything was bad in that one.
Right. So
I'm talking about the stuff
before.
And the fact that you can't swap somebody out and it gets you upset.
No,
Star
it
Wars
doesn't.
is going
First
through
of
the
all-
same. Star Wars is going through the same thing.
Yeah, and guess what's happening to Star Wars, Ralph?
Maybe there's too much Star Wars stuff out
Yeah,
there.
maybe that's what it is.
Maybe.
Maybe it's not that it's bad. Maybe it's just there's too much of it.
Don't you think too much of a good thing ends up becoming
Obi-Wan
bad?
Kenobi,
I mean, that's the whole
the
point.
best character in Star Wars, they completely ruin. And you think it's because there's too much Star Wars? The script was bad. He was bad because they didn't it wasn't the same character from the other movies. So no, I don't buy that. And as far as
I don't
Batgirl
think
goes,
you can keep repeating the same thing.
Well, what if they recast Obi-Wan Kenobi in the series with Idris Elba? Would that feel different to you?
well, I think that he's a brilliant actor. I think it'd be great. I actually love
And I say that as a big fan of colorblind casting. I think that's such an interesting trend in the business. I think like if you are interested in so many different, like if you're interested in Hamilton, if you're interested in U.S. history, all that kind of stuff, that's a show to see because it's a really, really, really good show. And it does something interesting with the race of the performers. But I think The Great on Hulu is probably my favorite example right now of colorblind casting because they're all real or real-ish people, but we don't have an image of them. We don't have Batgirl in our head for 50 years or 70 years or whatever it is. And you discover like that in Bridgerton, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
who doesn't have a vision in their head of who Batgirl is?
Oh,
No,
wait,
I'm saying
wait.
people have a vision of
Oh,
Batgirl.
yeah, right.
You don't
Yeah.
have a vision of Catherine the
Oh,
Great.
I see what you're
and her
saying. Yeah,
general,
yeah,
all
yeah.
that
You're
kind of
right.
stuff.
Right.
So,
But again, it's Batgirl.
right.
Okay,
Ralph.
that girl should be darker in her color.
There you go, Debbie. I love it. All right,
I don't know
Debbie and
about
Sean,
that,
what have
but-
you guys watched?
Well, first off, I got a confession to make.
Uh-oh.
I finished The Boys ahead of Debbie.
Coffee's for closers only.
Yeah,
What?
Well,
Do you know it?
okay, I kind of suspected it because
Oh,
I am
Oh.
like
Cheating on her.
he's jumping ahead, but it doesn't bother me that much because I'm dragging my feet on The Boys.
You're not into it.
wait till you get to the orgy.
The hero-gasm.
Herogasm.
That thing was so tame and ridiculous.
Debauchery.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel sick inside
Not really.
sometimes.
Well, what we
Okay.
tried
All
to
right.
watch was a recommendation from Ralph,
I feel
and I
going
believe
on?
Like,
they
I
were
feel
true.
guilty. I shouldn't be, I shouldn't be watching these things.
well, then don't watch them.
Yeah.
I know. That's what it's like.
That's why I skipped ahead.
There was a song that we used to sing in church, in the Baptist church. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see.
No.
Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. As the Father up above is looking down with love. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. There.
And
The
that's the
Boys
scene
is sparking a real religious revival. I did not expect
Yeah.
that.
I know. I feel
So
the
here's-
Holy
All right,
Ghost.
what'd you try to watch? Or you
Debbie,
said-
that's
no,
how we
what'd you
get
watch?
subscribers right there.
We
Yeah,
tried
too much
to
to
watch
do.
Ambulance,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
and then
Ambulance.
I'm sorry.
and Debbie made me turn it off, but just because of that first scene where the little girl is impaled
Oh,
with the fence post thing.
Oh, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
in
you
the
ruined the
first
first 5
minute.
minutes of a 7-hour Michael Bay movie.
It's a two-
Oh my God.
Is that 2 hours long? I forget how long.
2.5.
So I guess you're saying you didn't like it or you liked it?
She made me stop it.
No,
Oh.
you could have watched that.
Sean, you have your own agency. If you want to keep watching it, keep watching it.
No,
You
but
literally have agents,
Your
probably.
agency.
I watched something else.
Oh.
What?
Well, I watched while Debbie was sleeping. I watched the Most Hated Man on the Internet.
Oh,
That was a good talk about it.
Who is that?
It's the guy who ran Is Anyone Up, which was a revenge porn site. You know, where people break up with a girl.
he's pretty awful.
Nude photos.
Did you watch the show, Drew?
No, Kelly did, and she said it was really excellent and really, really upsetting. Because I mean, I had never heard of this guy. She'd never heard of this guy. I mean, everybody's heard of things like 4chan, but not this dude.
But the problem was what he was doing was despicable. But because he wasn't getting the influx of nude photos, he had another guy basically through Facebook conning people into getting their passwords and search women, approaching women and getting their nude photos. And then they would just say, somebody sent it to us. But they were really hacking into people's accounts, private accounts, and getting their nude photos and all. But this guy, it was just totally an immoral bastard. He was he was taking pleasure in destroying people's lives. And it's like, and not only were they posting these photos, he was like trying to get his audience as malicious as possible. It's like, what can you say about this despicable slut? And then the guys would just like lay in on everything about the woman.
Is this person in jail now or what? Or should I watch?
He was in jail for a brief time, but he's out. He was going to participate in the documentary, but did not. But
where is this airing? Where is it on?
It's on Netflix. Yeah.
Okay.
The most hated man on the internet.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, who put him out of business was this woman. He posted pictures of her daughter on there, and she single-handedly kind of went after this guy until she brought the forces together that destroyed.
Always the women. Same thing in that other show we watched about the guy who was scamming women. It's the women that go, once they get scorned, they go after. Yeah, the Tindler swindler. Always the women, Debbie. Always the women.
Yeah.
Debbie, did you watch anything, or did you watch everything this week?
I was like so wrapped up in our little world.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to mention what I mentioned on Cue It Up, the documentary on Paramount Plus called "The Day the Music Died," which is a documentary about the song American Pie, written by Don McLean.
I did watch that, Ralph, after you recommended it.
Yeah. It's one of these films like we've been watching lately where they repeat that song about 18 times in the film. And it's fun. I mean, it's fun. You kind of get into the lore of how he wrote it. We kind of all know the lyrics and we know what he was saying, obviously the Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper and Richie Valens. But this kind of dives in. I think it was, like I mentioned on the podcast, I think it was commissioned by him because he comes off as one of the greatest singer-songwriters ever created. But it's fun to see the steps.
The first album was terrific. The album with American Pie. The other stuff was really good.
Yeah, that's got Vincent on there and a couple of his other early ones that are really well done.
That was that's all you need, though, I think.
But like I said, if you like the song, you're going to love this documentary because you're hearing multiple versions of the song done by young people. Garth Brooks has a whole side story about how much he loves the song. He even brought him on in Central Park and they sang it together. Big honor for Brooks. So it's a fun one. It's about an hour and 40 minutes.
I'll tell you what amazed me the most. They show. So when he sat down, I don't know. He had an epiphany about writing the song, and he's got cassettes of when he originally wrote it. He was sitting there writing down the lyrics, and what he wrote originally is pretty much exactly what the song ended up. It didn't go through like all these big changes. The biggest change was they brought in someone to play the keyboards, which completely changed the song when they were recording it for real. But when he was writing it, he said it just came out and what he wrote ended up the song. I mean, very little of it changed, the lyrics and everything, the chorus. I found that really interesting. And you hear him, with the cassettes, you're hearing the original version with him just playing on guitar.
Yeah, they do reenactments. It looks pretty good. They shot it pretty well, as if you're watching.
Did they talk to Bob Dylan?
No. Although he mentioned Bob Dylan.
Was not pleased with that reference to him being the Joker.
Yeah, but he said it wasn't the Joker, and he wasn't talking about Elvis Presley. And there's something else he mentioned too. He goes, if I was talking about them, I would have mentioned them by name.
It had the same the scene that John's talking about, where the producer actually created the song that we all know and love. It's the same thing that happened in Get Back when Billy Preston came in and started pounding on the keyboard. It changed the whole direction of that song. And the energy changed, and it is what we're hearing now.
And he was just riffing. A pianist was riffing. He was listening to the song in his headsets. He didn't even have the music. And then he just started jamming, and it changed the whole dynamic.
And the producer brought him in, goes, I know the soul guy who plays the piano. We'll bring him in, see if we can. And it's fun.
Yeah, anyway, it was good. I really enjoyed it.
It's a shorty. It's not a multi-series documentary.
No.
And
and no one's getting conned.
If you don't like the song, you don't want to watch it.
Yeah, if you don't like the song, you will not like this show at all.
Okay. All right.
How many different versions can you hear of American Pie?
Now, our new format is when we get picked, we bring a film that we either have not seen all the way through or have never seen. So I got the first pick, and I brought Citizen Kane to the table, which actually, as I watched this time, I realized the only scene I had ever seen was I saw the scene where the mother signs him away, and that the shot through the window where he's doing the snowboard, and then they pan the camera and they open up the table and all that. We saw that. I remember seeing that in film school in college, but that's the only scene I ever watched of Citizen Kane.
You didn't watch the whole movie? You just watched that scene?
No, we just analyzed that scene because it was, Anyway, okay, so Citizen Kane. Let's watch the trailer and then we'll get into it.
Lights! Give me a mic. Thank you. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? This is Orson Welles. I'm speaking for the Mercury Theater, and what follows is supposed to advertise our first motion picture. Citizen Kane is the title, and we hope it can correctly be called a coming attraction. It's certainly coming to this theater, and I think our Mercury actors make it an attraction. I'd like you to meet them. Speaking of attractions, well, the chorus girls are certainly an attraction, but frankly, ladies and gentlemen, we're just showing you the chorus girls for purposes of ballyhoo. It's pretty nice ballyhoo. But here's some of our real Mercury people. This is the first time you've seen most of them on the screen. Hey, give Joe a little light. Thanks. Now smile for the folks, Joe. Smile. Joseph Cotton, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Joseph Cotton. I think you're going to see a lot of him. Here's Ruth Warwick, whom I know you love. Ruth. Look at the camera, Ruth. We caught Ruth with her hair up. And here's somebody you've all heard on the radio, so I don't have to tell you he's wonderful. Ray Collins. Dorothy Comingore is a name I'm going to repeat. Dorothy Comingore. I won't have to repeat it much longer. You'll be repeating it. And here's George Coulouris, who's a grand actor. I'll say that name again. George Coulouris. Watch it. Here comes Everett Sloane. Look out, Everett. Oops. Everett Sloane, ladies and gentlemen, he isn't necessarily a comedian. And here's one of the best in the world. Agnes Moorehead. I've said a lot of nice things, but Erskine Sanford deserves some more. Erskine Sanford. So does Paul. Paul Stewart, everybody. Citizen Kane is a modern American story about a man called Kane, Charles Foster Kane. I don't know how to tell you about him. There's so many things to say. I'll turn you over instead to the characters in the picture. As you'll see, they feel very strongly on the subject.
Charles Foster Kane is...
Sure, he started the war. But do you think if it hadn't been for Mr. Kane, the United States would have the Panama Canal?
Charles Foster Kane is nothing more or less than a communist.
Kane, governor. Listen, when the voters of this state and Mrs. Kane learn what I found out about Mr. Kane and a certain little blondie named Susan Alexander, he couldn't be elected dog catcher. I'm going to skin Mr. Charles Foster Kane alive.
I'm going to marry him next week at the White House.
Emily, I hear you've been stepping out with Charlie Kane.
Of course I love him. I gave him $60 million. Well, of course I love him. He's the richest man in America.
That's what all the girls say about him at first.
But you know, I can't help but admire him.
He's crazy.
He's wonderful.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what you'll think about Mr. Kane. I can't imagine. You see, I play the part myself. Well, Kane is a hero and a scoundrel, a no-account and a swell guy, a great lover, a great American citizen, and a dirty dog. It depends on who's talking about him. What's the real truth about Charles Foster Kane? I wish you'd come to this theater when Citizen Kane plays here and decide for yourself.
Okay, there you go.
That was a great trailer.
Yeah.
Even the trailer is brilliant. I can't get over that.
So let's talk about this film, this masterpiece. I really enjoyed the film, and I went in cynical. Now I'm looking at it I look at it as a masterclass in cinematography and a masterclass in inventiveness. The stuff that they pulled off, and the fact that Orson Welles took his Mercury Theater people, and said and negotiated so he had full control is we all know the story. We've seen Mank. We've seen some of the, I think it's RKO 281, which is sort of a behind the scenes of this film. I've seen all that, and it really enhances when I'm watching Citizen Kane to realize all this stuff. I was just amazed by the trickery they pulled off. Now the matte paintings, that's all fine, but it's really the other stuff they did. And his cinematographer Greg Toland, who he basically gave him not really a director's co-credit, but he put him on the same page with him at the end, which was him saying, this guy, because Orson Welles was new to the business, new to the film business. He's a theater guy. And actually this film is very theatrical in the shooting and the lighting and the fact that the way they use the ceilings to shoot the light through and keep the microphones up in the ceiling. No one before this, now this came out in 1941, no audiences had seen the ceilings of rooms. And these guys were shooting, they dug a hole to get down and look up. So for me, it was definitely a masterpiece in the cinematography and the editing. I mean, he was flying back and forth. I mean, meaning his scenes were going back and forth in time, which was new. So from an editing and cinematography standpoint, I can see why it's a masterpiece. Now, I know there was some, I think it's been voted the top American film year after year after year, right?
Yeah.
And now John's our Citizen Kane expert, so he's can't wait to start talking about this.
No. I want to hear more from you. I'm excited about this because you picked this so I couldn't pick it in the future. Bastard.
I did. There was a block.
I know.
Like you guys said, I Kane
blocked you.
You Kane blocked me. Yeah.
Kane blocked me.
Yeah.
So, and of course I read up on it and I got some backstory and I had seen Mank and loved all that stuff about the writing of this film. But again, it's a story, the story itself, I think Pauline Kael said that the Rosebud is a gimmick, a fun gimmick, she said, but a gimmick. I know she wrote an essay, a two-chapter essay or two-part essay in 1971 about how this is a shallow masterpiece, not a true masterpiece.
Well, she trashing Wells for
a little bit. She was going after him for the
not writing. A little bit.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I agree with her. But that's
okay, good. She tended to do that to certain films that she, but when you break down it's kind of a comedy. It's kind of funny about newspapers. It's all about the newspaper business. But again, I'm struck by the cinematography, and it blew me away knowing what they pulled off with what they had, and figuring out that they were lighting through the ceilings and all the tricks that they pulled, the dissolves in and out of scenes, the way they use black and white. Negative space, and some of that stuff they processed later. Some of it they shot live. Like we're doing this deep focus thing. I was just fascinated by what that cinematographer was pulling off. And those cameras, if you look at the behind the scenes, those cameras are huge.
Yeah.
And to pull off a scene like they do when the mother's signing him away and they're pulling that camera through the window, past the living room, they have a table that has a split in it.
Yeah.
So as the camera goes through it, it splits, and you see a little bit of that top hat that's on that table rocking a little bit. Together. Pulling stuff like that off is just a master class. And that's why what's that?
When they go into Susan Alexander's sign.
The neon sign split.
The roof.
Right. They split that one as well. Down through the window.
You can actually see the cut in the neon sign. You can see the little cut.
I found that stuff fascinating. And but the story, it's the rise and fall of a powerful guy who starts off as a populist. I thought it was very funny, that scene where he loses the election, where they hold up the one that says Kane wins.
Yeah.
And the next one they pick up is voter fraud.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay. So that was 1941. But I love the Randolph Hearst, comparisons and all that. But for me, it's about the cinematography and the direction and the editing. It is a masterpiece for that. Story-wise, you guys can get into it, but it didn't really, and
it's
Rosebud.
A great script by Mankiewicz and Kane, not Kane and Wells, but Mankiewicz was the one who knew
Hearst.
Yeah. Right. Well,
and Marion Davies
and Pauline Kael. That's what she got into in her two essays, was how much this was that whole scene where Jedediah is doing the review and falls asleep, or because he's drunk. And Kane finishes a review. That happened to Mankiewicz. That came right out of his life. Also, he was friends with those people. So he, we saw in the movie Mank, they're doing the scenes in, it's not Xanadu, they called it. I don't forget what
San
Xanadu doing that? San Simeon, right. So yeah, this all came out of his experience with his relationship with those guys. But anyway, I don't want you guys, this movie is, I just want to hear what you guys have to say. I enjoyed it. Do I care to see it again? Maybe. I did listen to the Roger Ebert thing.
Oh, you did?
I guess he went on the road with that.
Yeah.
He did that live because he's just, he's such a fan of it. And I found it, it was fun listening to him.
Yeah.
But again, for me, it was all the technical aspects that I was very impressed with. And I guess Orson Welles was kind of a blowhard, and he had a little bit of Kane in him, which comes across a little bit with some of the actors. I did like that he called out the people at the end.
Yeah.
The Mercury Theater group, people who we had never seen before. Only
a good cast is worth repeating.
And then after this, I went and watched the first scene in Touch of Evil.
Oh yeah.
Just to get a sense, and that's pretty cool too. But anyway, I'll hear what you guys have to say.
Well, let me jump in before John. I think I do that Pauline Kael piece, which is very famous, where she really lays into Wells.
The hit piece.
The hit piece.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of excellent points. Wells, this is a great film, and watching it this time, rather than concentrating on the script or the story. The script is fantastic, in my opinion. Performances are great, but I had a feeling I knew where Ralph was going, and I've always appreciated the photography. But there were a lot of touches I didn't really notice until I watched this time. Like at one point in the movie, he signs this declaration on the first paper they put out about the values and how this paper will never lie to you. And he writes it out by hand. He puts it on a table and he reads it and discusses it. Well, during that scene, Joseph Cotton is in the light, but the entire time Wells is talking, his face is in complete shadow. I mean, that goes to show you, a good director, because I hate to say it, but a lot of actors really enjoy having themselves in the light. But the fact that he did that is excellent. It's just the use of the lighting to tell the story is absolutely amazing. But I don't want to get away from the actual power of the story and the performances. It's the first time we see Joseph Cotton,
Agnes Moorehead.
Yeah, and Agnes Moorehead, and it's just an amazing cast. I know Debbie didn't like the woman who played Susan Alexander.
Dorothy Commodore. You didn't like her?
No.
Oh man,
why didn't you like her?
Why is that? What was the problem?
I think it was her voice.
Isn't that a thing? Isn't she?
It's a shtick. It's sort of like, what's her name from Born Yesterday?
Oh yeah,
with the Brooklyn
Judy
accent.
Holiday.
That's why she was a terrible opera singer.
Yeah, it wasn't an imitation. Born Yesterday imitated this.
Yeah,
this came first. But this is an amazing film, and
this came first, but she did her voice.
Was an imitation of someone who came later. I understand.
Yeah, it's just weird. She
it's
must
like
have
Hedley
had a time
Lamar
machine.
in Blazing Saddles. We're going to sue her.
It's Hedley.
We can sue her, Hedley.
You'll be able to sue her.
Yeah, I mean the lighting. You talk about leaning into the whole movie is, first of all, the reporter's always in black and silhouette.
That's right.
As a witness. This is what Roger
as the
Ebert
narrator.
Yeah.
They're all witnesses. Everybody that witnesses something is either on the left side of the frame or the right side of the frame with their back to you. So we're concentrating on what they're saying. The use of movement, like they would have three people in a scene still, and Kane would walk from the back. So your eye goes immediately to what's moving because everybody knows you look at what's moving. And the way they use that to direct your eye where it's going. I mean, that's a stage. That's theater, right? I mean, that's what you're doing in theater.
Well, I got something to say here about this movie. So the whole premise of this film is that, this guy is a mystery, and the whole film is trying to find out what is going on with this multimillionaire. What made his boat float? What is his life all about? And what is all this junk that he has in this Simeon or Xanadu? What's the purpose of that?
No man knows.
And the scene that really depicts it for me, what nails it, how boring it is to just, your existence is just to acquire things. What the heck is that? That is no value at all to acquire things. What we're looking for, people are looking for always meaning and stuff, not stuff, but
if you notice this, anytime something in his life affects him, he's always in the background while people are saying what's going to happen to him. So his mother's signing him away. He's out in the window. He doesn't know what's going on. When he goes bankrupt, he's got his Mr. Bernstein and his caretaker signing him away while he's against the back window, looking out the window, where the window's looking 10 feet tall, making him look smaller. Everything that happens in his life, other people are making happen. Now, he affects a lot of that. His actions obviously cause all that. But, I mean, and the Rosebud, the sled, I mean, that's the thing. He got that taken away. That whole scene where it's piling up with snow at the beginning, and he gets that taken away is why he's trying to collect things in his life. He's just trying to find things to love again, including people, and he just can't pull that off. So
he can't love. He just got to have things, you know.
And he wants to be loved.
Yes, but
like Homelander and The Boys.
well, it's a very shallow existence, even though he was very wealthy and amassed a fortune.
It's a very lonely existence.
Very lonely.
Yeah.
And the scene that really depicted that is that big fireplace.
Yeah.
Oh, when he's standing in the
fireplace. It would.
But when it's in the foreground, it doesn't look that big. Then he starts walking back, and you realize there's a tree trunk in there.
Yes, and it showed warmth.
They do that a lot.
It showed extreme warmth, you know, because the fire was always blazing. However, it was always cold, wasn't it?
Well, it also showed how small he was.
Yeah.
That was the point, right? She's in the foreground.
And one thing that always bothered me about the film was when they go to his place and they say it's in Florida and it's a mountain. Yeah. I'm like, there's no hills like that, you know.
They said in the beginning newsreel he built it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Didn't he build the mountain? He built the mountain, didn't he?
Yeah.
Let's move this mountain.
You know, but you know, as a piece of filmmaking, because I think everyone knows to a degree that this film was inspired by William Randolph Hearst, who was, like Kane, a newspaper publisher, one of the most famous and important men of his time. And it was clear to everyone. I think it was clear to William Randolph Hearst that it was based on him. And by all reports, that word Rosebud was the nickname Hearst had for his mistress, Marion Davies' clitoris. So that was a very low blow, as it were.
Oh, you would have said like private part or something like that. It's good that we're so clinical on this show. I think that's important.
It's called a clitoris, John. You might not have known that's a separate part of women's genitals. But
I've never seen one before, but I've heard rumors. So
I always heard. There's another thing I called it, but
where did this go?
No, but what I want to say
in the boat.
You got to ask yourself: is a movie like this fair? And probably for Hearst it was, but one person every time I watch this movie I feel bad for is Marion Davies, who was actually a very talented
comedian
actress. But Hearst always wanted her in like costume dramas and all. He had a higher goal for her than she had, which is accurately displayed in the film.
When he says we're opera singers, we're opera singers.
Wells wanted to make sure, he felt really bad about that people thought, because it was about Hearst, but she was not Marion Davies, not even close. And he felt bad that people thought that character was Marion Davies. And that's the one thing he really felt bad about. He thought Hearst could use the comeuppance, but not her. She didn't deserve it.
All right, I want to hear from Chris and Drew, and then John, you can get on your soliloquy about Orson.
I'm not going to get on a...
We got a 50th anniversary VHS pack back here, I think.
Denote? I mean...
You got a Blockbuster?
My soliloquy. That sounds so negative. I don't know why it does, but it does. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it's Citizen Kane. It deserves every laurel it can get. It's pretty amazing. When I was rewatching it, it just the opening sequence, just when they show Xanadu in the background, and then it cuts to the monkeys and it cuts to the K and how it's all in kind of ruin, and you have to look closely, but there's that scene where it's, I guess they're, like the Chinese dragon boats or whatever are in this little obviously man-made pond, and you see this preponderance of wealth, but it's all crumbling. It is, and then of course sometimes it's the it's the reflection in the water of Xanadu towering above it all. It sets that scene so well, and then
the other thing about that scene, Chris, the window. and every fade never changes position.
Yeah. Yeah.
The window, whether it's a reflection, it's always there in the same spot where Kane is in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And what I love about it too is it's unbelievably quiet. It's somber. It's all these things, and then you just essentially like smash cut, I guess you'd put it, to the newsreel, and it's just so overwhelming, and it's so great, that newsreel, the way they nail it. Now, obviously, they had already been putting newsreels into movies as ways to set stages and stuff by then. So it's kind of funny how he's almost kind of like playing with that a little bit, and with the kind of the over the topness, and then of course just all the like absolute darkness with the light, the way it's streaming in, especially when the reporter goes to the library, and he's in that one room, and they open up the thing, and it's like his unpublished manuscript, and you're only allowed to read about the parts about Charles Foster Kane and all this, and the old, I don't know. There's
with Brunhilde there.
Yeah. And it's like you watch this film, and as it goes along, you learn more about it. And I love the way that it's not just told straightforwardly. It is told through bias. You have some people who really liked him, some people who hated him, some people thought he was terrible, and some people were in the middle on the guy. I thought that was like, and I'm not, I don't have a perfect knowledge of film history, but it's obviously if something like that had been done before, it was obviously not done to that quality. Do you know what I mean? This is the one that people remember for that. And even when you look back at, at other films, great films that kind of use that idea, I'm thinking of Kurosawa's Rashomon, for example, where it tells, multiple angles of the same story. Now, this is a little different because each one takes different sections of the guy's life, but it's just beautiful to watch. I watched this a couple of years ago. My wife had never seen it, and unfortunately for her, she knew what Rosebud was. I mean, she already knew it was the sled. So, she was like, that really kind of detracted, knowing that it's coming. But she loved it because it is just a great film, top to bottom. And one of the things I wanted to find out from Ralph's thought is, because Ralph, you always talk about older films and stilted acting. And I was watching this film again, and I was like, while the language that they use is vernacular of the time, and it's probably a lot more cleaned up. I'm sure people cursed a lot more back then than they do in these movies. I felt like it was really natural, especially when, Kane is talking to his guardian, right? When he's talking about, he's like, oh, I lost $1 million last year. I plan to lose $1 million this year and $1 million next. And at that rate, maybe I'll go broke in 60 years. And it was just such like I don't know, he's just a terrific actor. And he didn't seem, even though he comes from the theater, he seemed to have none of that staginess, and none of them did. They were all very terrific, in my opinion.
I'd argue that the only false one for me is Mr. Bernstein. Really?
I love him.
I know he's a good character. I'm not saying, but he's like a funny guy. He's like he's always there, and he's always into, he's always supporting the guy. That's the only one. That's the only false note for me, was just he was a little too comical, a little too, hey, Mr. I just didn't, and these are radio actors, right? So their voice is their most important asset. But I did find it not stale. I found it pretty contemporary.
Yeah, but that scene when when he's talking to the reporter, talking about the girl he saw with the parasol.
That's one of the best lines in the film.
That was a wonderful scene, and he was so good in it. And he looked, remember they put him in that big high back chair when he's talking about Kane.
Totally
to
agree.
Make him look diminished.
Totally agree.
That scene was incredible.
But then you look at the scene where Kane's dancing around and singing his own song that he wrote, and Bernstein just comes off as like a fanboy at that point. That's all I'm saying. That's the only. I'm not.
Yeah, no, you don't have to defend it, Ralph.
No, I liked his
I'm
character.
not calling you out. I'm just.
No, but I'm just saying that. But I agree. It felt very contemporary. It didn't feel staged.
Yeah.
And just a couple of quick notes there. And there's obviously a lot of history that goes along with this film about, Hearst trying to get it stopped and, refusing to print positive reviews of it and all that kind of stuff. But if you're ever really interested in something that did go unbelievably wrong, The Magnificent Ambersons is, the first, say, 30 to 40 minutes of that film are as good as Kane, if not a little better. To be quite honest with you, it's amazing. I highly recommend it. Even though the end is
well, they
truncated
butchered it.
and
Yeah,
then
they butchered
slapped
it.
on this ending, and it was a mess. And they did it all while Wells was down in South America doing something
for the military,
for the US government. Yeah. Anyway, but it's a great film. And it's really amazing. And then, believe it or not, though, there is a kind of, I would not call it a remake in any way, shape, or form. But if you've ever seen the movie Velvet Goldmine, which is
never heard of it.
Oh, it's a I love it. I think it's fantastic. It is basically, uses the exact same format as Citizen Kane to tell a fictionalized version of the glam days of David Bowie and Iggy Pop. So, but anyway, it uses almost the exact same format.
Wow.
And it's great. It's got, I really like it. It's got great music. A lot of people find it a little bit hard to watch though, because it's,
I think Drew was one of them.
No, I hated everything that Todd Haynes made until he made Far From Heaven and Carol, which I thought were spectacular. And Velvet Goldmine to me was like, this is everything I don't like about him in a movie. And I saw that in the theater in LA. I remember when it came out because it was an interesting premise and it had a great cast. Was it Ewan McGregor and Jonathan Rhys-Meyers or something? And I mean, I hated it. I hated it.
Well, what about Citizen Kane?
Well, I think Citizen Kane is I'm gonna put down a brave stance here. I think it's significantly better than Young Frankenstein, and I'm comfortable saying that out loud.
I'm not okay. I don't agree, but
he's setting us up for something now.
Well, I find that, I mean, I saw this movie in college. I saw this movie for a film class, like you said, John. I mean, it's the innovations of the movie are just spectacular on so many different levels. So the more naturalistic acting and everything. I think one of the most fascinating that you don't really think about when you're watching it, unless you're really interested in how movies are made, is obviously the cinematography is striking, but the makeup is extraordinary.
Absolutely.
And the way that is
especially the
meshed
aging
together
stuff.
with how the cinematography does. You forget that Charles Foster Kane is, like a 60-something man being played by a 25-year-old,
right?
Which is, pretty amazing. It reminded me of Max von Sydow. He's always been that old actor, but when he was in The Exorcist, he was like 33 or something, and they put that. Young? Yeah, he was very young, and they put this really amazing makeup on, and the best kind of makeup is when you don't see it. And to not notice Orson Welles' makeup as anything other than natural, as it bounces around through time and stuff, is actually, it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't connect with this movie. I find it more nutritious than delicious. I think it's a very important movie. I think it's a very important film to study in the history of filmmaking and innovation. I feel like his arc, I don't know that much about Hearst. Obviously he reminds me of Trump, except he's not a moron, because of the way that he treats women, the way that he built a fame on demagoguery and media, saying, I had forgotten the lost election was a result of fraud, that kind of stuff. And Trump actually has spoken on this movie, which is interesting because he said something that was insightful, which was about how this movie is about accumulation and how that doesn't really get you anywhere. And then the next thing he said was that, nobody really knows what Rosebud is. It's one of those great mysteries. I swear to God, he said that. It's really quite extraordinary. But I think, the movie, it doesn't do it for me on an emotional level, even as I appreciate it. But I find Orson Welles really interesting as a person and his life. And I mean, to see that he essentially is in the business, and then what he did, he peaked at age 25 with this movie. That doesn't mean everything else he did was terrible. Of course not. But I mean, the amount of control that he had over this movie, he never had again. And the things that he was able to do while he was, he was successful and getting older and heavier, following that sort of Brando thing. And like, he's still doing, Touch of Evil and F is for Fake and
Third Man,
all this, and Third Man. And I mean, he's such a stupendous actor. When he shows up in the Third Man, it's just riveting to watch him on the Ferris wheel and everything. And of course, my second, it's really my favorite Orson Welles performance is the Paul Masson, champagne commercials.
Turn camera. Mark. 102, take one. with overlap. Action, please.
The outtakes are just spectacular because you're watching one of the greatest actors in the whole world slum and confuse directors and actors.
Just do anything.
When the director says action and then there's nothing and then
the French champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence. There is a California champagne by Paul Masson.
I mean, like, it's just like there's a man in there who's made some of the greatest movies ever, and now he's just selling champagne from California. So I also think, I mean, the movie is interesting because, as I said, I don't know that much about Hearst. I know about yellow journalism and that part of history. I don't know that much about him personally. I couldn't have told you like what was the name of his, girlfriend's clitoris or whatever. But the way that the movie criticizes Hearst and the way it anticipates so many things that shape our world now, it anticipates families like the Murdoch family, which is essentially what's portrayed in Succession, and how you have such incredible wealth and how it distorts your family and it distorts your relationship with your children. I thought honestly there would be more about his son in the movie. There Will Be Blood kind of went down that path a little bit as well. But well,
remember in the newsreel they talk about the wife and the son.
The wife and kid get killed.
Too, so we kind of
right. But I mean,
I think that would have been a huge psychological thing, losing your only son.
Well,
that
I think
would have been more of a factor in the story.
I think that it could be a factor in the story, except that the whole point of the movie is we don't really know him at all.
He's a mystery, right?
Yeah.
And so he. I mean, he was dead set on winning an election, and then he got found out by a guy he already knows is dirty. Right. And he's like, basically, I'm just going to stay here and I'm going to get you. And what a surprise. He didn't lose. He didn't win the election, because that's what happens in the real world. So I was curious to see what we were going to say about this, because, it's just been so much written about it and so much said about it, and it deserves all that attention and everything. But I mean, at the end of it, it's like Kane had all the things and he had nothing. And that's a very relatable thing for people in our world.
Yeah. Again, I attacked it from a completely technical and creative. That scene in the middle where the wife, where they end
the
up
montage.
The montage. It's not really a montage, but they start together and they end up at the shot where they're separate on the table. And how innovative that was at the time. Like, oh my God, what did they do?
Well, that was like a 10-page scene. That he said, let's do this instead.
And they did it backwards.
And
so
it told you everything you wanted to. Yeah, told you everything you need to know about why their marriage broke up.
That's what I mean. There's so many interesting nuggets in this film that, as a film student, I know that's why my teacher showed us that scene in the snow through the window and all that. Because to do that in 1941 with the size of those cameras was just crazy. Anyway, all right, John. You got 30 seconds.
You guys have already said a lot. Look, I love this movie. I watch this movie, I don't know, probably 10, 20 times a year. I watch this. Wow. I love this movie for a bunch of different reasons. The thing for me that I always sit and just amazed at is I think about myself at 25, right? And I think about where my mind was at. And then I think about this guy who at 25 had been on Broadway. He was doing, in Harlem, he had a theater company. He was doing the War of the Worlds radio broadcast. He was the Shadow. He comes to Hollywood, never making a movie. He gets an unprecedented deal where he's got complete control given to him by RKO, George Schaefer, the producer. And he creates, at 25 years, with no knowledge of film, creates one of the greatest, in most people's minds, the greatest American film ever made. And part of the reason why, like Greg Toland went to him and said, I want to work on this picture. And Welles is like, great, but why? He goes, because you don't know anything. And Toland was working for directors like John Ford, who, when you see a John Ford film, it's not a Greg Toland look, it's a John Ford look, where Toland wanted to, put his stuff in it. And a lot of the cinematography and all the angles and stuff was him. Well, Welles, at one point, Welles is changing all the lighting, because in the theater, that's what directors do. Well, in film, that's what the cinematographer does, but Toland's not saying anything. Finally, after about 2 weeks, someone told Welles, that's not your job, it's Toland's job. And he went to Toland and apologized, and Toland said, hey, listen, Don't worry about it. He loved working from the technical aspect of this film that I love, all the special effects, all the angles. What I love about it is it wasn't just done to do it. It was done to further the story. So when he's young and idealistic, everything's in the light. When he starts to go the other side, everything's in the dark. That scene you're talking about where they're signing away the kid's life, they're in the foreground with the bright contract. The father's a little bit back, diminished, because they're pulling the kid away from him till they throw out the money. Now he changes his mind. And in the dead center of the screen is the window with the little kid. And this is, everyone's talking about that kid in the background. That's why they did that. And why he wanted the fixed focus. He wasn't the first to do that. Stagecoach did it. And one of the things Welles did for a month was watch Stagecoach every single day to see how to make films. And Welles' reasoning was the human eye, everything's in focus. So why can't it be that way in film? And that's why he wanted that. So you'd see all the details of everything. So it wasn't, and by the way, special effects, like 50% of the film is special effects with matte paintings and the optical print.
Star Wars.
Yeah, it really
Roger
does.
Ebert was just raving about.
Yeah, when you go back and look
movie.
at the making of this and they show you before and after, it's incredible, the stuff. So it's not just to do it. I mean, everything had a reason. Why do you want to film from so low? To show him bigger than life. Why do you go up high? To diminish him. And again, the other thing for me as an actor is Orson Welles in this, at 25 years old, the progression of his age isn't like caricature, right? I mean, he's 40, 50, he dies at 70 years old. But to see the performance, not just in the body, when he smashed up that room, his body language was of an older person, but not a characterized older person. And his voice, even what he did with his voice, you cannot believe that that's a 25-year-old guy doing this. So for me, that just, in the whole cast, you can tell that they've worked in radio for years, but because their rapport with each other, their acting senses were incredible. You know, when they get up together, and it was funny. It was, and Bernard Herrmann did the score, and the script is fantastic. And the Kale thing was a hit piece on Welles. Look, Mank deserves a lot of credit for this movie, but Welles, I mean, the script that he wrote was a 6-hour movie. Welles condensed it all down and added a bunch of different things that was definitely Welles' vision. And when they hired Mank, part of the deal was he doesn't get credit. And then he says, well, I want credit now because he saw how great this movie was going to be, in fairness to Welles. Now, Welles was an egotist, and frankly, how could you not be after all the success he had at that age? So I don't really fault him for that. But like what Drew said, you know, the pinnacle of his film was this movie. That's not to diminish any of his other movies, but only because he had total control over it. So you think to yourself, what could have happened if he could have made, like Ambersons, if they left it alone and let him do what he wanted to do? That was, I mean, I've read the script and it sounds like an amazing movie. And Agnes Moorehead probably would have won an Oscar if they did the original movie. But you look at other movies, you know, that scene at the end with the warehouse, Raiders of the Lost Ark, boom, the warehouse at the end. I mean, how many things got pulled from this? And they weren't the first one to do some of the stuff that they did, but they definitely did it better than anybody else. And for a guy who never did a film, that to me is just what amazes me, what he was able to accomplish. And again, if he didn't have the cinematographer Tolan, if he didn't have the set designer, because their budget wasn't gigantic. So what they did with those sets was amazing. And frankly, the makeup guy, so I read something about him. He wasn't a makeup guy. He swept the floors in the makeup room. That's who, and Welles went in and saw him doing something with putty and says, do you think you could age me? Guy says, absolutely. And look what he did. The makeup is incredible in this movie. So everything about this movie, the way it came together, I love the story. And the other thing I love about this, everything is told by somebody's perspective, right? When they do the flashbacks, except for when he said Rosebud, nobody witnessed that. So no one was in the room.
Well, we don't know that.
His butler.
No, the butler wasn't there. The woman, the nurse comes in the room. Nobody's in that room. And then at the end,
didn't the butler say he heard Rosebud?
There is nobody in that room. Even Welles talked about it. He goes, if they're worried about that, then I don't have them. And at the end, when you find out who Rosebud is, Nobody in the movie finds out, but the audience heard him say Rosebud, and the audience knows what Rosebud is. That's it. I love that about the way they booked in that. The audience knows, but the characters don't know that.
Everybody who's, even I knew what Rosebud. I mean, not the
No,
clitoris
I
thing,
know.
but
I'm
the
not.
other
I'm
one.
saying.
It was a Simpsons episode.
But
I'm saying in the film.
I know, but I'm just saying, even knowing that, seeing how he hid the sled at the beginning, there's a scene where he puts the sled up against somebody's chest, and his hand is right over where the
Thacker.
I mean, I get it, but I thought the butler is the one who heard him say it. So
no,
how
he
did
says
John, you're pretty sentimental, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I think
No,
so.
I
Yeah.
thought you were going to say, "Oh man."
I don't understand. How did anybody know he said that then?
That's the point that Wells was making. That's a choice that he made, and he said, "Look, if anyone's worried about that or question that, then I haven't done my job." And nobody does, because he says that line. Well, I heard it. Well, he's the only one. The nurse is the only one in the room. And then at the end, it's not about the sled. It's about his life at that house in the snow.
But
obviously,
the sled is the mystery solved for us.
But I love that we know.
John, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Since you're the expert.
I'm not the expert, but I do love this movie.
I think you know the answer to my question. So,
right.
The question is, what was the reason for the wealth that came to the father and mother to have them give up their son?
Because, well, if you listen to the dialogue, and if you remember, Agnes Moorehead says, the father says, I'll beat him, or I'll hit him or something. And Agnes Moorehead says, that's why he's going away. Because he wanted him away from the father, and she knew that he wasn't going to get the kind of education in life that this money could provide being there.
But
so
what
she
was
wanted
the money? What was they finding?
Oh, it was there was a card. Someone couldn't pay to stay there at the boarding house, and they gave him a deed to they thought was a worthless mine, and it ended up the load, the something load,
Colorado load, I
the
believe.
Colorado load. So that's where they got all their money. Yeah. And that line is a hilarious line. I'm going to lose $1 million this year. I'm going to lose $1 million next year, and I might lose $1 million later. And I might be broke. Pause. In 60 years. Wah, wah, wah. And then it cuts. And by the way, that opening scene. So you're describing Kane. They're talking about Kane. Then it's that montage with Thacker reading the paper every time, where the paper's trashing Thacker, and then you see Thacker holding the newspaper. He folds it, and there's Orson Welles in the shot. What an introduction! It was like John Wayne in Stagecoach. It was exact kind of entrance.
All right.
Love it.
I want to add one thing to that.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say about the depth of this script, and it doesn't. I mean, Thacker's obviously the villain, but it's not cheap villainization, because at the end, when he's signing over the paper, Thacker's like really kind of understanding.
Yeah.
And he's expressing concern about the country and the depression and all.
Yeah.
And even Geddes, or whatever, who is the
boss.
The boss.
Jim Geddes.
He gives him a chance.
Right.
And I love the scene afterwards when he's there with Kane's wife, and he goes, "Do you have a right?" He's like, "I'm destroying your husband. I'm destroying your family. But I'll give you. Do you need a ride? I have my car. I have my carriage here." I mean, there's a little touches that give, even the quote unquote worst people their
well, one of the things Cale said was it's a comedy.
Yeah, it is. I think
there's funny things in it, but it's not a comedy.
I understand, John,
Yeah,
but that's the point. There are lots of funny
Very funny,
moments in
yes.
here, ironic and funny, and I just
getting back to Mankiewicz, he was the screenwriter.
Yes.
And Wells came in as the director and the actor.
Right.
Well, they collaborated on the script.
Well, I think Mankiewicz
with Hausman too.
Well, here's the thing, because we see this all the time, right?
Do we? Yes.
Yes. The writer is the writer.
Right.
The writer has the screenplay. It should be the writer getting the credit for the screenplay.
Well, Wells had a contract that said, and apparently a lot of the stuff for the theater, the Mercury Players, that he got credit for writing, other people wrote. And I believe Mankiewicz wrote some Mercury Theater plays for him. Mankiewicz was a screw up, though, just like it portrayed in the movie. Though a lot of that in that Mank movie was false, like why he did things. But he was definitely.
They did have John Hausman babysitting him.
Yeah, who underperformed
in
life. But he was a decent man.
And his brother,
And I
Herman,
do recommend. Herman was
No,
the
that
guy.
was Herman.
And the other one was not so much a decent man. If you read the recent biography, the Mankiewicz brothers, But Herman was definitely the more likable of the brothers. And he's self-destructive, and.
Right.
They asked his brother, who was a 2-time Oscar winner as well, as a writer, goes, "How much do you really think your brother wrote Citizen Kane?" And he goes, "If you knew Orson Welles' ego, the fact that my brother's name is even on the film tells you that he wrote something."
But what does that tell you about how he felt about Toland? Because Ralph, you're right. On the director's credit card, he put Toland right there. That doesn't happen.
That's what I mean. I think, and John, the power of a good cinematographer. And I thought about this while this film was happening. That news thing we shot where you couldn't figure out how I was going to get, with a single camera, get a double camera set thing happen. And with a good cinematographer, anything can happen.
Yeah. I got to say something, my own personal experience, both in advertising and movies, both features and advertising. You would be surprised how many times the cinematographer is essentially directing the movie. Oftentimes even, particularly if it's inexperienced directors.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Like actors,
I'm not.
They usually direct the actors, which is of course very important. But setups and things like that, in project after project I've worked on since the 90s, since the 80s. We get like an art director to direct something, and we just give him a really strong cinematographer.
Listen, I used to go on, and they mentioned, I think Ebert mentioned this. There were times that Orson Welles was confused about scene direction.
Right.
And I used to go on shoots as the editor of whatever project to help the director figure out scene direction, because they're all wrapped up in the creative. And that's the important thing. You just have people you can collaborate with. It just so happened that these two, between Toland and Orson Welles, it was a beautiful marriage. Oh my God. Orson could do all the tricks he wanted to do, and this guy, the digging of the hole, all that stuff, the lighting, all that was those two guys going, how can we make this thing work as best we can? And they
one other little tidbit. I want to throw out one little tidbit. That scene at the beginning where they're in the screening room. So that happened because they hadn't gotten the okay to start shooting yet. And they wanted to test, Toland and Wells wanted to test a few things. So they said, we're just going to do some test reels. So we're just going to use the studio screening room. And what they were doing was actually filming. I mean, they lied. So they started already. And in that scene, Alan Ladd is in that scene. And Joseph Cotton is in that scene as one of the reporters. When you hear the voices, you can definitely hear Joseph Cotton's voice. So he was already, when he started filming, he was already 2 days ahead of schedule because he said, I'm going to do this just as a test reel. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, that's in that RKO 281. And I think that they went over budget, right? Or they went over time? He had to have.
Well, I think they did go over budget because Schaefer had to rein him in a little bit.
Yeah, all right. Do we need to rate this American masterpiece classic? I don't think so.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think this requires it, but I'm excited because you hadn't seen it before. I'm really glad you liked it because I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I would. I don't think I would. I think I may. I listened to Ebert's commentary without the,
which is excellent.
He did a great job. He definitely was. It was good to hear his voice too, because he's been dead like 9 years now.
And this is his number. He puts this as #1 movie too, Ebert.
Yeah. And Bogdanovich loved Orson Welles, right? As a kid, he was with him all the time, and all these people. Anybody have anything else you want to say? Anything? Any last words about this?
I wanted to ask John. Maybe there's a story. It's either it really happened, which is totally possible, or it's just an apocryphal story that they started shooting this movie and they started getting dailies, and it became very clear that Orson Welles didn't know anything about crossing the line, which is what you have to do when you are shooting dialogue from two different sets, two different shots.
Yeah.
And so apparently, rather than blow up the whole movie, Toland said to him, "Do you know what this is?" And Orson Welles like, "No, I don't know what that is." And Toland sat down with him for a few hours and explained everything to him and showed him. And then they went back and made this amazing movie.
He was on Dick Cavett. And
okay.
And what was happening was they would say, you have to look this way, stage left, versus, and he goes, no, stage right, because he's from the theater. And Toland's like, no, that's not going to work. Well, that then Tolan brought him to his house and said, look, I can teach you everything you need to know in about 3.5 hours. And he sat him down. It was after 10 days of shooting too. And, and he taught him, and that was it. So that's absolutely
But
true.
if you notice, 80% of this,
story.
80% of this film is just wide shot and people talking within the scene. There
Right.
is, and when you do see that 1 or 2 cuts where they cut away, it's a
Right.
little jarring. There's one specifically where they cut to Orson Welles and he's doing this weird smile thing. But most of it is 4 or 5 people in a shot, layered in there. So the director is directing you by whoever's talking and whoever's
That's
moving.
right.
So
that's his theater background too. Not a lot of close-ups.
And a lot of, like I said, a lot of directors do not understand screen direction, and it blows my mind sometimes when you're on set with these people and you have to explain, no, you've got to do, it's but
I mean, we were shooting a video and he's trying to tell me, you got to look this way. I go, Ralph, that doesn't make any sense to me. Just trust me. And finally, okay, Fred, I'll trust you. And sure enough, it comes out perfect. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
So
me and Greg Tolan, what can I tell you?
Well, I want to say one other thing. I didn't know that he had made that. I guess Orson Welles had made that comment, or it was Toland. I can't remember what you said about how they wanted the deep focus because that's how eyes work.
Human eye,
which of course isn't true. I mean, I'm looking. I have to pick a plane of focus to focus on, and that doesn't hurt the movie for me or anything. But I remember that was a specific thing that Alejandro Iñárritu said about how he directed The Revenant. Which was in 2015 with Leonardo DiCaprio, and the whole thing is supposed to be like one shot. And of course, the human eye actually doesn't use those lenses, which is why those lenses look spectacular and unusual to us. And the human eye blinks, regularly, so there isn't a continuous visual stream. But the biggest thing was that year, that movie was up for Best Picture, and it lost a spotlight, as did the actual greatest movie ever made, Mad Max: Fury Road. So thank you for giving me the
I knew you were going to work that into this podcast.
I predicted Spotlight was going to win just because it was that type of film.
It's
but
a
Mad
fine
Max
movie.
Fury Road deserved it.
Well, can I say one thing? One person we're leaving out is the editor of this film.
Oh, yeah.
Who would later be one of Hollywood's top directors.
Robert Wise.
Yep. I mean, when you think about it, you got Toland, you got Robert Wise, you got Bernard Herrmann, and you got Orson Welles. And,
Agnes Moorehead.
I want to say one thing, because when I was in film school, so many people idolized Orson Welles. And they always said, oh, I want to be like Orson Welles. And I was like, no, you don't. You don't want to peak that early. And to me, Orson Welles is a very sad story. I mean,
yes,
he constantly worked. He was a larger-than-life legendary character. But, I mean, you look at this. You got this. You got the almost masterpiece of Ambersons. And then what's the next great film as a director is, well, Lady from Shanghai. And think about that mirror sequence, which I'm reminded of in Kane, when he walks by those mirrors and has that infinity thing.
Yeah.
All I could think was Lady in Shanghai. And then what's his next great Hollywood film after that? I mean, he did great work as an actor, was probably Touch of Evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But again, to the earlier point, he never had total control like he had in this one movie.
Yeah.
That was the difference.
The film that I always kind of come back to for him, and it was a European film that he made later in his life, especially if you like any. No, I was going to say that Chimes at Midnight.
Oh yeah,
I saw that at the theater.
Yeah, it's if you have any, affinity for Shakespeare, it's pretty amazing, and his portrayal of Falstaff and how he brings basically a side character to the foreground, even though Falstaff was in a number of different King Henry of the King Henry plays, he brings them to the front. It's really amazing. It's something else. I did want to throw this out here. I don't know if any of you have sat through the Other Side of the Wind, which was
I can't get through it.
I really liked it. It's bananas, but
yeah,
what is
it is bananas.
But whatever is actually a little better than that is there's also a kind of a partner documentary. It's a lot about The Other Side of the Wind, but just about Wells in general. It's called They'll Love Me When I'm Dead. And it's a very prophetic title. But if you like Wells or interested in Wells at all, check it out.
Check out the Bogdanovich interviews too. They're fantastic. It's on
really
YouTube. Fantastic.
And
Great
also check out Check out The Magnificent Ambersons from A&E in 2002, directed by Alfonso Arau, starring Madeline Stowe and Bruce Greenwood, which I haven't seen because what is the point of making that as a television movie? But
did he redo it with the original, with the Wells script?
it's based on the Wells screenplay and his editing notes and the book that that Wells was adapting.
That one caused a big rift between Wise and Wells because Wise was the one that had to chop it up. But I even think he directed. Did he direct some of the new scenes?
Yeah, he directed the
ending.
The very last part where they're walking down. Joseph Cotton and Agnes Moorehead are walking down the what do you call it? The hallway. And it's so tacked on.
Yeah.
It is almost as jarring as the end of the original Blade Runner theatrical cut, where you're like, wait a minute, why is there suddenly sun and everything's okay? And
Wise didn't have a choice; he had to do it. I mean, it wasn't like
he
he didn't.
And I
have
mean,
a
that
choice.
was the
He's an
thing.
employee.
Yeah.
According to some people, they were like, look, they were Cotton and everyone was sending him telegrams saying, you've got to come home. You've got to come back. You've got to help us out here.
And they destroyed the footage, right? They couldn't assemble it.
That's the lost. That's the grail.
That's the great
American film.
Yeah. I mean, supposedly the story is that Wells was actually cutting it somewhere in South America, that he had this work print sent to him and he was cutting it down there, but then lost interest. There's a bunch of Wells films. There's like two, like one is called, I think it's called The Deep, that he just never finished the ADR. The whole thing was done. He just didn't go back and do the voices in the ADR. So there's literally like two Wells films totally done, but he never did the
well, he was always looking for money to complete stuff, wasn't he?
well, that was part of it. That's why when you watch that documentary,
maybe he was selling the wine before its time.
There you go.
He would take anything. He did Casino Royale just to get the money.
Yeah, he would
also with Bernard Cribbins, by the way.
And truthfully, Wells's final screen performance, it was a voice performance. Transformers the movie. As Supercron or
you want if you like Orson Welles, check out the Dick Cavett stuff.
I've seen a bunch of that.
What a great storyteller! I mean, I'm just he really was.
Yeah,
Jack Lemmon is looking at it's just incredible. Anyway,
he tells this great story about Winston Churchill. I just definitely check it out. He also apparently met Hitler when he was young.
Yeah,
that's a great Zelig shot in this movie.
Yeah,
with Hitler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, good pick, Ralph.
I think I did mention the editing at the front, and that whole newsreel thing was all B-roll that they had in the studio that they just slapped
and the guy who played the reporter did the voice.
Yeah, right. And I love the fact that Robert Wise took pieces of film and rubbed it against the floor to add the scratches to some of that newer stuff. So a lot of cool editing tricks too in there. Again, for me, a master class in directing and editing and shooting. I just
and acting,
fantastic. Okay, acting. Okay, I guess so. But all right. So Chris will not be here next week. So I got you three on the old.
What's going on now? Oh, the wheel. The wheel of fun.
Whoever let's see.
Oh, so there's only four of us in the wheel.
Yeah. Debbie again.
All right, Debbie. A movie you have not seen.
Okay.
You need some time to think about that one.
I have not a clue as to what.
Okay. Well,
the world is your oyster then. You can pick anything.
How about the rest of the boys?
Oh.
Well.
You haven't seen it, so.
That's not a movie.
Should be.
You got me there.
Yeah. All right. Well, Debbie, come up with something. Let us know in a couple days.
I will.
All right. Everybody, thank you. That was
this
fun.
was awesome. I love.
This was a great show.
Very good.
Yeah.
If we do say so ourselves, let's see if anybody subscribes based on this show.
Well, I'm on a movie. I'm on a Facebook movie group, and I announced that I don't like to put stuff on there because then everybody does that. But I wrote that we were going to talk about Citizen Kane. And they're all very excited about it. So I'm going to post that, and hopefully we'll get some subscriptions for that, I hope.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so.
All right.
And by the way, you should subscribe because this is classic. This is classic stuff. So smash the like button. If you like Citizen Kane, smash the like button. And if you know anyone who likes Citizen Kane, share it.
There's a few people that like this film, I think. Except for Pauline Kael.
Well, she
liked the film. She just discredited the
She's a hack.
Oh, my God.
Pauline Kael is
She was discredited.
No.
How is she discredited?
All right, guys. Everybody have a good week. Debbie, we look forward to your famous pick. Can't wait.
Ralph, I'll see you this weekend, I believe.
Yep. I'll be up.
Wedding reception number 2.
Debbie, you should pick Batgirl.
Yeah, we can't say that, unfortunately.
Can't wait to hear your pick.
See Batgirl.
All right,
Ralph,
everybody.
I got the beer funnel too, so we're all set.
Oh, perfect.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I tell people that story all so much.
Thanks. Well, that I almost choked. That I almost died.
Everybody there was like so old and doing this.
It was pretty pathetic, wasn't it, Drew?
It was something.
pathetic.
It was something.
I
Yeah.
had a good time.
Yeah.
That was a
you
good
did.
time.
What do you remembers?
Thank you very much. Have a good week.
He remembers your wife.
Stop it.
Rosebud.